Today on the Locked On Blues podcast, the St. Louis Blues stormed to a 5-2 win in Game 5, led by an incredible 3-goal third period from VLADIMIR Tarasenko, getting his second playoff hat trick as a member of the St. Louis Blues. Jordan Binnington got the win, becoming the winningest goalie of all time in St. Louis Blues playoff history. And plus, the Blues play tonight, 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central, with a chance to send them to round two. I'm going to be talking about all of that and more in today's episode, so make sure you stay tuned.
You're Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Locked On Blues podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and your number one source for daily Blues content. I'm Josh Hyman, and got a busy episode for you guys today. Gonna try to stuff 2 episodes of content worth into one, a recap of Game 5 and then a preview for Game 6. Now, this episode is coming out a little early on YouTube because we're recording it early because Tommy's gonna be at the game tonight, so I wanted to give him a chance to edit and all that fun stuff. But he should have a good recap to share with y'all because tonight's game should be fun. So I'm talking about that. Before we get into any of that, wanted to thank everyone out there for making Locked On Blues your first listen because we are free and available on all podcast platforms. All right, so like I said, busy episode today. Basically going to try to stuff 2 episodes worth of content into one. Trying to recap Game 5, which was electric, full of tons of storylines, and then also kind of previewing Game 6. Blues have a chance to send themselves to the second round for the first time since the year that they won the Stanley Cup. So big stuff happening tonight, and a big preview episode coming up because I believe the Minnesota Wild are switching to Cam Talbot tonight in goal. So it's going to be a test for the Blues offense for sure, getting a bit of a different look there. But first, before we get into any of that, I want to talk about Game 5 because Game 5 was a fun one. Started off great. The Blues did their thing that they did in 2019 a lot, getting a really early goal, and Ryan O'Reilly scored a power play goal off of the rebound, assisted by Scott Perunovich as well as Braden Shen. So my Locked On player of the game pick is already looking a little rough as Buchnevich gets 2 assists for himself in this game and Nick Leddy did not. So I'm going to take the L there. Definitely made a mistake in changing my pick last minute. But it is what it is. We take the L, we move on. We'll get it next time. Let me actually, let me text Tommy right now and get his pick for Locked On player of the game. All right, this is live right now. I'm texting Tommy as we speak. All right, so we'll get into that a little bit later. But anyways, he definitely took the W in that first one. He picked Scott Perunovich, who had a great assist on that penalty or on that power play goal to start the Blues off. But then Kirill Kaprizov did what he's done best for the Minnesota Wild, and that is scoring goals. He scored 2 power play goals within 4 minutes of each other. For his 6th and 7th goal of the series, which I believe is most all time in a playoff series for a Minnesota Wild player. Crazy stuff. 7 goals through 5 games for Kirill Kaprizov. But the only problem there is that's kind of the only offense the Minnesota Wild are getting. And that was apparent, through the rest of the game. The Blues did a really good job of shutting Kirill Kaprizov down. Nick Leddy did a really good job of shutting Kirill Kaprizov down. So if I can give myself a little pat on the back for that Locked On player of the game pick. But anyways, then things kind of looked up for the St. Louis Blues. Obviously, after that first period, it's a little discouraging. I think the Blues did what they have done a couple times, and that they outplayed a team in the first period or in any period and didn't really take as much out of it as they should have or as much as they could have. I think besides the power play, the Blues did a good job of almost being the better team in that first period. It just kind of took a lot of momentum away when they took that 2-1 lead. And it was definitely an opportunity for the Blues to kind of crumble under that pressure. Chance for Jordan Binnington to crumble under that pressure. And in a pivotal Game 5, the lead is everything. The lead is crucial. So the fact that the Blues came out in that second period and played as strong as they did, and it was back and forth for most of the period, a couple good chances here and there, and then it turned into just an absolute garbage goal from Brandon Saad. garbage goal in the sense that, like, just one of those crappy rebound. It wasn't like the first goal where it was, a beautiful putback by O'Reilly, or the second or third goal from the Wild where it was a wrist shot. It was just a puck that was pinballing around and, had no right, turned into a goal. But that's what a guy like Brandon Saad does, and that's what the St. Louis Blues do best, is kind of creating scoring chances out of something that isn't really, the prettiest. So, there was that. Blues tied it up there, and then heading into the third period, Vladimir Tarasenko just took things into his own hands, scored a goal a minute and 3 seconds into the period, scored another goal a minute and a half after that, and just like that, it was all she wrote. It was crazy, watching the air just get taken out of the crowd. The second Tarasenko scored that second goal, it was almost just like laughable, like oh, okay, there goes Tarasenko again, scoring his goals, doing his thing. So that was great. I mean, it was vintage Vladdy, that went around on Twitter a lot. But it really was just muscling his way to the middle of the ice and then using a portal gun to make the puck appear in the back of the net. He's got such a quick release, and he showed that on both the first and second goal. There was nothing Fleury really could have done. Tarasenko just picked his spot and hit it, with like a laser scope. It was great. And it really shows what a guy like that can do when you have him on your team. Superstar by every sense of the imagination in that third period was Vladimir Tarasenko. And when you have a guy that can take over a game like that for a brief amount of time, it can win you games. And the Blues showed that. I'm excited to see what Tarasenko can do tonight. I think he's probably itching to get a couple more shots on goal. He only had one goal in the series heading into that game. Obviously, he's got 4 now, but I'm excited to see what he can do tonight. Should be a fun one. That being said, though, in the second segment, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about Jordan Binnington as he became the winningest goalie in St. Louis Blues history, and also Cam Talbot because he gets the start for the Minnesota Wild tonight, I believe. I will confirm that while I'm doing the ad read. But yeah, should be a fun game tonight. So I'm talking about that, talking about the goaltending matchup first and foremost. Before I get into that, I want to tell you guys about Athletic Greens. Now, Athletic Greens has this great product called AG1. It's this little supplement you put in your drink, put in a glass of water. It tastes delicious, and it's great for your gut health. With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all of those important things. Best part about AG1 is they're a company that likes to give back. They're a climate neutral company. In 2020, AG purchased carbon credits that support projects protecting old growth rainforests. And in 2020, AG donated over 1.2 million meals to kids in need. So to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. And we'll be right back with the second half of today's episode. All right, so yes, a confirmation is here. Cam Talbot is starting in Game 6 versus the Minnesota Wild. So, I mean, that's going to be a big test, I think, for the Blues and for Jordan Binnington as well. Before I get into more of the game details, I do want to talk about Jordan Binnington and give him props because he did become the winningest goalie of all time in St. Louis Blues playoff history. I want to see what the actual stat is here, but I mean, it's crazy that we're talking about this. I feel like after this regular season that he had, but here he is, the winningest goalie of all time with 18 wins as a member of the St. Louis Blues in the playoffs is good enough for first place, which, I mean, you could argue says more about the past success of the St. Louis Blues than anything, but we don't need to go down that road. But yeah, I mean, he got 16 wins in his first ever playoff run. That's a trait that not a lot of goalies can say that they've done, because that means you won a Stanley Cup. And like, I just feel like we've gotten so clouded in our narrative of Jordan Binnington because he's had one or two rough playoff runs. Obviously, he hasn't shown that magic that he showed in that winning cup run, but I mean, he still did it. he still has the potential to be a Stanley Cup winning goalie because he's done it in the past. And I think in these last 2 games, we've seen that DNA out of him. Obviously, he hasn't pitched a shutout or anything crazy like that, but he's been reliable. He's kept the Blues in games, and I mean, 5v5, he's been great. He gave up 2 power play goals to one of the best goal scorers on the face of the earth right now in Kirill Kaprizov. But I mean, other than that, he stood tall, and he really kept the Blues in the game in that game 5. And as much as, Tarasenko took the attention away in his third period, Jordan Binnington did a great job of keeping the Minnesota Wild, not named Kirill Kaprizov, off the board. He's been very, very frustrating to play against for Minnesota Wild players. And, he knows how to win games when it matters. Obviously, losing 9 straight in the playoffs is tough, and you don't like to see that, and it's definitely a blemish on his resume. But like Tommy and I talked about on the last episode, the lack of crowd probably helped in year 1, and then in year 2 of that 0-9 stretch, he happened to face the Colorado Avalanche in round 1, who were firing on all cylinders. Didn't have Justin Falk for a lot of the series, didn't have David Perron for the entirety of the series, and the Blues just didn't really play like they belonged in that series. You can't really blame Jordan Binnington for that record. Obviously, could have been better, and he definitely played poorly in those games. It's not like he was just getting left out to dry and doing his best. He definitely played poorly, but so did the rest of the team. It's not like he was taking them out of those games or taking them out of those series. Now, all of a sudden, the Blues are playing well, and Jordan Binnington is back to playing well on top of that. Husso has been great, and I'm still honestly not ruling out seeing Ville Husso again in the playoffs at some point with the way that this season has gone. But as of right now, Jordan Binnington is showing that he can be that Stanley Cup winning goaltender again. Hasn't had one of those miraculous, shutout performances yet that he had a couple of in that Cup run. But he's shown those flashes. He's looked comfortable. He's looked confident, which is something that I don't think we've been able to say about Jordan Binnington a whole lot. Is we know how much he plays off of his confidence and having a little bit of an edge and a little bit of swagger. And I feel like when he was struggling, obviously, naturally, it's a lot harder to get that confidence. And we saw that out of him. We haven't seen a whole lot of his signature Jordan Binnington moments. Haven't gotten a lot of good post game comments out of him. No antics on the ice, and that's not to mean that he's not not in the zone, quote unquote. But I mean, it's still, the energy still quite isn't there from where it was to 2019 Jordan Binnington, when he was just, on top of the world, and he truly felt like he was probably the best goalie on the face of the earth at that point. Not saying he was, but that's how he played. He played like he thought he was the best goalie in the world. And honestly, he might have been for that brief stretch. So if he can get that confidence back, or even 80% of that confidence back, it'll reflect in his play. And I think we've seen it reflect in his play in games 4 and 5, because he's played the best hockey he's played in a very long time in those games. If you take context into account, he's played the best hockey he's played since the Stanley Cup final in those 2 games, considering playoff hockey is so much more important than regular season games. So I'm so encouraged by this. I think he's going to continue to build his lead on the all-time winningest playoff goalies list for the St. Louis Blues. I think the Blues are going to, knock on wood, win this series. They are in every position to. And Colorado, if and when the Blues match up against Colorado, again, knock on wood, I don't want to get into that. Don't want to count my chickens before they hatch, but I think that series might be a little bit closer than people think. Even if it's Minnesota, Colorado, I think that series would be closer than a lot of people think. But that being said, I think the Blues have a pretty good chance, with the way that Jordan Binnington is playing lately, to make some noise in the playoffs. And it's going to be a big test tonight, because the Blues are seeing a different goalie in Cam Talbot, a goalie that doesn't have as many of the flaws as a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury has, but at the same time doesn't have quite as high of a ceiling as Marc-Andre Fleury has. So, game times where it's been like almost impossible to score on Fleury, and he's been stealing games and making ridiculous acrobatic saves. You're not going to quite get that out of Cam Talbot, but you're also not going to get the big juicy rebounds and maybe the early game shakiness that you're getting out of Marc-Andre Fleury. So I'm expecting a bit of a goalie duel tonight, maybe more of a low scoring game. Again, I could be wrong. All these games have been high scoring, so maybe tonight's game will be no different. But that being said, it's going to be a big goalie matchup tonight. And I'm going to be talking about that. Tommy did get back to me with his pick for lockdown player of the game, so I'm going to be thinking about my pick for lockdown player of the game as well. I'll give you guys that. Plus, my predictions and my take for a pivotal Game 6 in which the Blues could advance to the second round. Make sure you stay tuned. Before I get into that, if you're like me and you think that the Colorado Avalanche might get upset in round 2, you got to put your money where your mouth is at betonline.net. Now, our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, hockey playoffs, Major League Baseball, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. And I'll be right back to wrap up today's episode. All right, so the Blues made a goalie change earlier in this series, and it did wonders for them. The Blues defense kind of figured it out a little bit once Jordan Binnington went in between the pipes. They haven't really looked back since. It's a culture shift for any team. It's a wake up call. And the Minnesota Wild are doing the same thing. Minnesota Wild are switching from Marc-Andre Fleury to Cam Talbot. Bit of a different look, like I mentioned before the break. Cam Talbot's more of a steady Eddie goalie. He's not going to make these flashy saves. Probably not going to steal a game and pitch a shutout, but he's not going to give you these big rebounds. He's not going to give you good scoring chances when, maybe you don't deserve one or shouldn't have had one based off of the initial shot. You're going to have to capitalize on initial chances more with Cam Talbot. That being said, though, it'll be a little easier to score on those initial chances with a guy like Cam Talbot versus a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury. So I don't think that the Blues are going to have a harder time with Cam Talbot, but they need to know that it's going to be a different situation and a bit of a different approach to the offensive game. Maybe take a little bit more time setting up your shots because you're not just going to get those rebound opportunities left and right. Cam Talbot doesn't have perfect rebound control, but it's better than Marc-Andre Fleury's. So again, you just got to keep that in mind. And you're also going to keep in mind that it's probably going to be a wake-up call for the Minnesota Wild. Players not named Kirill Kaprizov on the Minnesota Wild have had a really, really hard time scoring. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know he has 7 goals, and I don't know how many goals the Minnesota Wild have in the series, but I'm sure it's not much more than 7, meaning that they probably want some other contributors on offense. Let me actually check here how many goals they have in the series. 2, 4, 7, 13. They have 13 goals on the series. So more than 50% of their goals have come from Kirill Kaprizov, which has been good. Obviously, the Blues have done a really good job of shutting everyone else down, but you gotta prepare for them to deviate back to the mean. And Kirill Kaprizov is going to be Kirill Kaprizov. I'm expecting him to get at least a goal tonight because that's what he does. He's having one of the best playoff series we've seen out of anyone in a long time. But those other guys have got to wake up eventually. And when you change goalies, that's, like I said, that kind of lights a fire under you. I'm expecting to see a stressed Minnesota Wild team, stressed to save their season. I think they're going to translate that into some really solid play. I think really what it's going to come down to is that first period of weathering the storm of a Minnesota Wild team that is hungry, that knows that it's go big or go home. They're going to be coming out of the gates like they're shot out of a cannon. But that being said, the Blues have been a spectacular second period team, and lately a really good third period team. So the starts have been a little questionable for the Blues that first period. And tonight, with a new goalie, I feel like it could be easy for the offense of the St. Louis Blues to get frustrated a little bit, to kind of start pushing a little bit. And getting away from their game because the things that were working against Fleury aren't necessarily working against Talbot. They just got to stay calm, stay within themselves, and weather the storm. Like I said, weather that inevitable push from the Minnesota Wild at the beginning and end of the game that say, "Hey, we don't want to be eliminated yet. We don't want to go home." It's gonna happen. Minnesota Wild are a great team. They've played the Blues really well in this series, and there's going to be a pushback tonight. We might see the best hockey out of the Minnesota Wild that we've seen all series. But that being said, I expect to see the best hockey we've seen out of the St. Louis Blues that we've seen all series because they've been in this situation before. They're good closers. They haven't had an opportunity to close a series since they won the Stanley Cup, and they performed really well in all of those clinching games in that cup run, whether it's the overtime victory against Dallas or, the clinching game against San Jose. Where they just kind of really had control over the game the entirety of the time. Or Game 7 against Boston, where it was all she wrote after one period. The Blues have had a really good track record in these clinching games lately, and Jordan Binnington has had a really good track record in these clinching games lately. So I expect tonight to be no different. That being said, though, it is time to make our picks for Lockdown Player of the Game, and I'm going to go give Tommy's first because he's picking another underdog. He wants to make life tough for me. He wants to make me think of some bottom of the barrel player that might have a goal tonight, but might not. So Tommy picked Ivan Barbashev, which I think is a great pick, and I'm frustrated that he picked him before I could pick him because Barbashev's a guy that hasn't really been all there offensively this series. He's been good. He's done his job. He's played his role well, but he hasn't had that any offensive production like he's had in the regular season, and he's due. I think Barbashev is a great choice. He's a guy that's going to make an impact, and for that reason, I think that he'll get himself on the board tonight. Now, okay, my pick is someone that might be a little bit less of an underdog traditionally, but I still think, offensively, he's been kind of close to Ivan Barbashev in production, and that is Braden Shen. Now, Braden Shen, obviously a little bit flashier of a name than Barbashev, but his offensive numbers hasn't quite been there this series. I don't think he's had a ton of production, but he's been playing aggressively, and he's been playing hard. He's been throwing a lot of hits. He did have an assist last game. Let's see. He's only got 2 assists in the playoffs so far. So let's see what Barbashev has. Barbashev has 1 assist. Okay. So right around the same. Braden Shen is a guy that plays with a lot of grit, plays with a lot of hustle, plays with a lot of tenacity. But also, like I said, has been there before, knows what it takes to clinch a game, and hasn't quite gotten his offensive game going yet, doesn't have a goal yet this series, and he's a guy that's taken plenty of shots. He's had a lot of scoring chances, just hasn't been able to find the back of the net. And I think tonight's the night where that's going to happen. I think a guy like Callum Talbot almost favors Braden Shen's play style a little bit more. Get some of those greasy goals, maybe some deflections out front. We'll see. I don't know. That for that reason, I'm picking Braden Shen as my lockdown player of the game. Hopefully, I can come away with a win here because I know I took the L last game. So fingers crossed. But that being said, that is all the time we have for you guys today. So thank you all so much for listening. Make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Hit that notification bell. That way, whenever we upload a new video, you'll be notified. You can watch it right away. Follow us on all of our socials, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Locked On Blues. You can follow me on Twitter at Josh Hyman NHL. You can follow my co-host Tommy at TWelcher15 on Twitter. Like I said, thanks so much for listening, and as always, let's go Blues.